welcome to this lecture series. Today we are discussing about types of interviews and its relevance in journalism. We were discussing about the pre-interview stage, and I was telling you that why this stage is very crucial, because this is the stage where you prepare for the interview. You write down your points so that you are aware of the important crucial points that you must cover in the interview. And you should not completely rely on your memory. Type up your points, supporting information, so that you are able to make maximum use of the interview. Knowledge in the field will certainly enhance the quality of the interview. Make a list of all the questions you can think one can ask. Developing questions. Once you have thoroughly researched your topic, prepare a list of questions to ask. That will help you remember all the points you want to cover once the interview is underway. In fact, it is always a good idea to have some extra questions in your hand. And there's another advantage of preparing before the interview. It will make you so thorough with the subject that if the interviewing is answering something which is incorrect, you will be able to intervene and correct him. Familiarize yourself with the subject or the organization you are talking about. Watch or read a few past interviews from the reporter covering your research area. You should be able to find their past stories on their website or via their social media handles. You must know the person and the subject in hand. Determine your main ideas. Determine your focus. Identify the key points of the interview and keep your preparation focused on that. You must know what you want from that particular interview. You must think about the outcome and the target audience. Think through any potentially difficult subjects, if there are any, that you are not sure of whether that would be answered or not, or if you think you did not get authentic sources to confirm. Don't jump into conclusions. Look at every dimension of the story carefully. One has to be unbiased and non-judgmental. Remember, these are the key rules of journalism: to remain unbiased and non-judgmental. Seek suggestions. Don't hesitate in asking questions from other people, taking their suggestions if you think your interview is going to be a tough one. Talk to your friends, colleagues, and your boss or mentor about the interview in advance. You can also take suggestions from the subject experts to enhance your understanding. Take suggestions from every possible corner. And you must know your time limit. You must know by when the interview has to be done and by when it has to be broadcast. You cannot sleep over it. You have to be careful that if you are planning an interview, there has to be an end to the interview. Identify the length and duration of the interview so that you stay focused and get the desired results. If you are doing it for print media, you should be clear what is your word limit. For which newspaper you are doing it, when it has to be published. Is it a hard story or a soft story or a feature story? All these questions should be clear in your mind. You must know the scope of the interview. While preparing for the interview, you must remind yourself of the nature of the interview. Whether it is going to be for the main newspaper or it is to be used in a feature paper, it is to be used immediately, or is it to be used after a few weeks or few days? This will immensely help you in setting the tone. Establishing contact with the person. Once you are ready with your preparation, establish connect with that person or the organization. Call yourself and request for the time politely. Also, convey the reason and the purpose and required time of the interview. Be very straightforward. Provide your contact details for further communication. You must tell the person how much time would you take for the interview and be accurate on that. If you are saying you would need an hour's time of that person, then you stick to that hour's time. Block your time on your calendar to prepare. Note down the time and the location for the interview. Prepare well. Make sure you reach the venue before time, unrushed and properly dressed. Relook at your questions and be confident. This confidence will come to you if you have prepared thoroughly and have spent time on that. Now let us discuss about the second phase, which is about the interview itself. What will you do during the interview? Start it right. Start with a warming up session. Do some casual talk so that the conversation starts on a soothing note. Especially if the interview is for print media and one has the time, then start with a breathing space. Breathing space is important because it gives the interviewee to relax and answer questions coolly and calmly. Ask direct questions. Don't try to be over smart. Ask what you have to ask. Come straight to the point if possible. Don't intentionally beat about the bush and never waste time by asking vague or unrelated questions. Be friendly but don't be over polite and don't be rude. Don't deliberately offend the interviewee. Be friendly or at least courteous. Establish a rapport. When starting out, don't abruptly launch into your questions. Give some space. Treat the beginning as a warming up period. Talk a little with your source. Compliment them on their office or comment on the weather. This puts your source at ease. Keep in mind the sentence formation. The sentences should not be long. Your questions should not be complicated. Ask simply. Simple questions will get good answers. Complex questions will get bad answers. Never attempt to impress someone by asking complicated or lengthy questions. Keep it simple and short. Listen and nod. The person must get an impression that you are listening to the person. And that habit you must develop. It takes time to develop, but you must know when you are interviewing, you should be completely alert and focused. Sometimes reporters don't listen very well. Practice the habit of listening. Also nod wherever needed so that the person is assured that he is being listened to carefully, that he is not wasting his time and energy. Also, observe your body language and mannerisms. Sometimes journalists look too rude, too loud, and too aggressive. There is no need to be aggressive. Look at your body language and be very careful about it. Try to get the best of your question. Even if the interviewer is trying to evade an important question, persist on your question in different ways so that you get some answer. Take questions from the answers. This again is a very valid point. Let us say you have written 10 questions, but the interviewee has already asked 4 questions before you asking them. You asked 1 question, but he answered to the rest 4 also, not knowing that you had those questions with you. So if he has answered, don't repeat those questions. And this will only happen when you are listening to the answers carefully. Don't just go by your notes. Try to take the conversation ahead by asking questions from the answers being given. It will add a lot of value to the interview and will generate much desired results. Please remember, you have done your hard work, background detail and research so that your interview is the best, and it will come out as the best interview if you will take the conversation ahead by asking questions from the answers that are being given. Your quality of questions will ensure the quality of answers. Your questions should have depth and accuracy. They should be decently asked and they should be pointed. Key messages are the king. Connect back to your main points with phrases such as related to that or on that topic or connecting dots. Presence of the camera or the recorder must be told to that person before you start it. Keep in mind, even if a camera or recording device isn't rolling and you are engaging in pre or post interview conversation with the interviewee, that conversation has the potential to be used for quoted. Also, never say anything that you do not mean. Be careful on what you share, even off the record. So, during the interview, one other requisite is to keep it natural. An interview can be an uncomfortable experience, so keep things natural and conversational. Instead of mechanically reading out your list of questions, weave your queries naturally into the flow of the conversation, which means you must immerse yourself into the conversation. Also maintain eye contact as much as possible. Nothing is more unnerving whenever it looks up from their notebook. Be open. Don't be so focused on getting through your list of questions that you miss something interesting. So, it is a good idea that you have written your questions, but don't keep looking at your answers, your notebook, and because if you do that, you might miss something which could have been an important lead to the interview. If you are interviewing a film star and she mentions something interesting about an old film and has a news value, then take that into account as well. So sometimes what happens is you are interviewing somebody, but there is some other side story that emerges. And in fact, it has also happened several times when one interview is cut into several pieces and it is used in different bulletins, in different formats. And this will happen only if you are alert during the interview. Your interview can lead into an unexpected direction, but if it leads to something interesting, then why to miss it? Maintain control and the grace. Be open. Yes, but don't waste your time. If your source starts to ramble on about things that are clearly of no use to you, don't be afraid to gently but firmly steer the conversation back to the topic at hand. You must also develop the art of taking notes properly and precisely. In the beginning, reporters are often afraid of taking down the notes word to word. Don't sweat it. Experienced reporters learn to take down just the interesting material they know they will use and ignore the stuff they won't. This takes some practice, but the more interviews you do, the easier it gets. You are not supposed to write every word being said, but at the same time, you are also not supposed to miss something crucial or misrepresent the fact. Yes, one can always record the interviews, provided prior permission is taken. Recording can be helpful if you are doing a long interview that you will have time to listen and type out later. This is applicable for print media or online sources, but for television in any case, you are recording the interview. One must check the guidelines of the newspaper website where you are working and proceed accordingly. And when in doubt, ask permission to tape. But if you are doing a story that has to be written on a tight deadline, you likely won't have to transcribe a recorded interview. Stick to note taking or deadline stories, but also remember the golden rule. Never rely only on your recorder. Always take notes even if you are using a recorder. Figuring dead batteries after coming back to the office will completely ruin your story. So prepare well, which means you should have two things with you. If you are recording, okay, and the second is your notebook, your pen. Because even if the recording has not taken place properly, you will have your own notes with you. Wrap up professionally. If the interview is done, be a professional in wrapping it up. At the end of the interview, ask your source if there is anything that they want to discuss which has not been asked about. You can also ask about links to the story that you might have missed out. Be sure that the meanings of any terms or words used by the interviewee that you are unsure about, and always ask if there are other people they recommend that you will speak to you. Also, keep your enthusiasm till the end. If you are sleepy, if you are not liking it, if you are making faces during the interview will immediately fail. So, which means your level of energy and inquisitiveness, your curiosity, your desire and your understanding of the subject, the tone of your questions, everything should be intact till the entire interview. Remain natural, ask neutral and open-ended questions. Tough issues make tough questions, short questions, focused responses, and you can make up a strategy. If it is going to be a tough interview, make a strategy and accordingly ask questions. Keep your facial expression appropriate, establish rapport, build the interview on answers, not on questions. Now, what will you do after the interview? It is not that you have prepared the interview, the pre-stage, and during the interview you have interviewed the person that everything is over. In fact, your work will start now. The real work will start now, because now you will be working on the final product of that interview. First of all, arrange your notes properly. Filter the most crucial parts of the interview, cross-check your facts, verify wherever needed, and write your story. If the interview requires a follow-up, then you must do that. Write that in your organizer and follow when needed. Sometimes in an interview, you also need to cross-check things. You must do that once you are back. While if the interview isn't live or it is for a print place, then ask when it's scheduled to appear and you can review it beforehand. Although reviewing won't always be an option. Write for multimedia if needed. Write your interview as per the need of the newspaper. You can also think of writing it for the web edition or the online video section. Make amendments wherever needed. Now, the other very crucial point here is writing headings, captions and pictures. Now, as a journalist, since you have done your homework, you did some groundwork, you did interview, you've come back to the office, you already know the subject too well. Then you should write the heading clearly, make some captions, suggest more captions if possible, and use the pictures effectively. Furnish your story with every detail. Complete it by writing the heading, subheading, blurb and also captions. Arrange pictures according to the need of the interview. Social media needs of the organization are to be kept in mind. Keep in mind the specific social media needs of that organization and pitch your story accordingly. Go by the rule book of your office and don't forget to give credits for photos, etc. Once your story is done, it is published, then obviously you can publicize your story. But keep in mind that while you are finalizing your interview, you should focus on what is the most important thing. Maybe you asked the person 20 questions, but answer number 16 is more crucial. It is worth a headline, then shift it like that. You must know the inverted pyramid style. You must know the rule book of journalism. So don't go in a childish manner that you ask the first question and the first should always come first. After the interview, decide yourself, apply your mind, which is the most crucial point. Should it be the number 1 or should the number 16 be the number 1? Take your story to the next level and publicize in a dignified manner wherever possible. Also make a rough paper design of the interview. Plan about the placement of photos and captions if needed. If you had taken a telephonic interview, prepare your notes accordingly. If it was a specialized interview because famous personality is involved in the interview, you must write your captions accordingly. In the minimal questions school, where you have asked very few questions, you must know how to develop that also into a proper story. Now I would like to tell you what not to do in an interview. As I said, interviewing is a very crucial field in the arena of journalism, and all through our lives we will be using this particular technique. But there are certain points that you must never do. First is failing to ask a question or asking two questions simultaneously. Do not mix two questions. Always ask one question at a time. And don't fall short of questions. This will happen only if you have prepared yourself well. Don't overload questions. Or don't add statements or comments to the questions. You are supposed to be unbiased, neutral. You have to ask questions straight and in a simple manner. Asking close-ending questions to be avoided. Know where to pause and thinking on your feet. If you are speaking too much, using too many words, it can confuse the interviewee or irritate the person. So know where to pause, where to take a breath, where there should be a breathing space. Dealing with statistics, they could be very heavy. So you should know what statistics are to be used and can those be round figured. Making a change in the strategy as per the need. This means you've gone for a breaking news, but there's a feature story, and vice versa. You've gone for a feature story, but it turns out to be a breaking story. So be prepared and make a change in your strategy as per the need of the hour. Your dress sense must match with the nature of the interview that you're going to do. Off the record and on the record comments are to be looked at very carefully. Taking down your notes smartly and precisely, because these notes could be the backbone of your interview. Sometimes what happens is that you have written something beyond the interview. You have noted down something which you can use later on. So thus such notes are very important to preserve and look at them carefully while you are finalizing the interview. So you must keep in mind, as a student of journalism, you must master the art of interview, because this will lead you to many success stories in the future. In the world of journalism, conducting interviews is an essential skill that can make or break a story. Whether you are a seasoned journalist or just starting out, mastering the art of interview is crucial for obtaining accurate information, capturing compelling narratives, and building strong relationships with your sources. So in this lecture series, I have discussed with you number of points. Number 1, what is an interview? Number 2, why is an interview important? Why should you be interviewing somebody? Number 3, objectives of an interview. And number 4, skills of an interview. I have also discussed with you the various stages of interview: pre-interview stage, interview stage, and the post-interview stage. The pre-interview stage is dedicated to research, your homework, your preparation, reading about the subject or the person or the personality and the reasons for the interview. During the interview, you go well prepared, on time, you have your handbook with you, you have your spiral copy where you have all the notes written with you, and then taking the interview in a very alert manner and a sophisticated manner. You have your questions ready, but that does not mean that you will read out each and everything from there. You must know the purpose of the interview and you must be alert on what the person is saying. Your 20 questions might become redundant and there could be a change, there could be a possibility that you have to ask something which you had not even thought of. Depending on the situation, especially in a breaking news situation, the style and technique of interview again is very, very crucial to master. Then post-interview stage, when you come back to the office, you reflect upon what you have recorded or what you have written. On the basis of that, you decide whether the story actually is a feature story or it is a breaking news story, a hard story or a soft story. This will only happen when you are fully acquainted with your subject and the topic. So, in these different phases, you prepare an interview. Today, this discussion is crucial for all of you, and I would urge you to look at some of the popular interviews, read about them. You can also study some of the textbooks on journalism and read how interviewing skills have developed over the years. Today, when we have a large number of television channels in India, print media is growing, online journalism is picking up, citizen journalism is also much talked about. The role and significance of interviewing skills will always increase. One can master this art with sophistication, hard work, dedication, and research. Kindly do more research on this subject and try to pick up the skill because this skill will lead you to successful and effective journalism. I hope this lecture was hopeful for you and you will read more about the interviewing skills and its relevance in journalism. I wish you all the very best. Thank you and namaskar.